Hello, everybody. This is Debbie from Teacher Success Coach. First of all, I must apologize for the lateness. We both were having technology issue. I was having technology issue first. When I actually connected with Christina, she then began to have technology issue. And, we just had to come on and off a number of times until we actually got it sorted. So that's the beauty of technology. When it works, it's fantastic. When it doesn't, we have all the challenges, and we had that today. So thank you guys for logging on and hearing us. Today we are looking at homeschooling, home educating, with another guest from around the world. As I said to you guys, it is so important that you really assess whether or not you want your child or children to be educated in the traditional system. It's work for some people, but you need to remember you are your child's best teacher, because you know your child than any one of us. Secondly, you need to realize that in the mainstream education, in a lot of cases, as much as we're trying to do differentiation, it's one size fits all, because we do not have enough space, enough time to do each child's needs, and then not enough of us. As much as we would love to, to cater for your individual child's needs, it doesn't always happen, because some children are very creative, would like to learn in a creative way. Some children are very, in terms of do things in a very photographic way. Some children are very tactile. We cannot cater for all those needs and all those different learning styles and techniques, etc. We do the best we can. Some teachers would chuck and talk. I don't chuck and talk. I find everything I can to entertain my students, because as someone who's got psychology background, as a psychologist, we know the more unusual you do things, the more you are able to remember it. So that's one of the techniques I feel that a lot of teachers could use. And also, as a home educator, you're using all sorts. You're not even staying in your house to educate your child. Your child is being educated on the street, right? And we cannot do that as educators. There's sometimes, if I teach in the countryside, I could actually do my lesson outside, which is fantastic. But that's just once in a while. In London, I can't do that. There's no space. But when I teach in the country, it was beautiful. I was able to do that. As a home educator, oh my goodness, you could teach your children in the back. You could teach your children in the park with nature, right? But we can't do that. So my advice to you is really think of how you want your child to be educated. Anyway, enough of me chatting away. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting the offer to come online and share your story. I'm really grateful for that, because we are hearing someone first-hand experience, the challenges, etc. And as I keep reminding people, I have not been a home educator myself. I'm an advocate, a really strong advocate for home educating. Yes, I'm a teacher, but I could also see the other side of the coin. So therefore, that's the reason why I'm encouraging people to home educate your child. If you want to be with your child, and if you want your child to get the best of both worlds. School work for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. Anyway, introduce yourself, tell us where you come from, etc., and just start telling us about your journey.
All right, awesome. Again, thank you for having me. My name is Christina. I have 4 kids. I have a 15-year-old girl, an 11-year-old boy, a 10-year-old boy, and an 8-year-old girl. They are home right now, and actually we have a little friend over, and they are being a little loud. So if you hear them, I'm going to actually real quick, I'm going to go actually tell them to lower their voices.
Yeah, so that's one of the beauty of home educating. I'm not telling people to do it. It may not suit everybody, but I'm strongly suggesting it.
All right, I'm back. All right, so I'm here in America. So right now it's about 1:40. So it's part of our school day. And so we are taking a little bit of a recess, so that way I can go ahead and talk with you here. But back to my family. I have been home educating for about 11 years. And we live in Missouri in America. And for context, if you were to take a map and put your finger right smack dab in the middle of the country of the United States of America, that is where we are.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you so much for accepting the offer to come on. And one of the things I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get, you know, home educators or homeschoolers from across the globe so that people could see how things differ and get different ideas of how
Mhm.
to actually home educate their children, because I just think it's wonderful, you know, looking at the way different people do it. So one of the things is, what inspire you to decide, you know, sending your children to the traditional system?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, I'm a home education coach, and I'm also I'm writing a book called Authentic Join the Journey, and I also host a women's conference called Bloom and Blossom. It's a home education conference just for moms, and so I get asked this question all the time. They're like, what inspired you? And the funny thing is I'm actually from Washington State, and again, for context, in the United States, it's in the Pacific Northwest where Seattle is. And where I grew up, I had never even heard of home education. I went to traditional school and I literally didn't even know a single person that was homeschooled ever. And so fast forward, I came here and I'm in Missouri, and this is a much more like there's a lot of home educators here in Missouri. And I met my friend, she's still my best friend, and she had a 2-year-old little girl at the time, and I had a 10-month-old little girl, and I'm in my early 20s. And she was like, I think I'm gonna, homeschool my daughter. And I was like, you can do that? I've never even heard of that before. And I was just right then and there sold out to this beautiful life. I was like, I knew I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I knew that at the end of the day that nobody was going to care more about my daughter holistically than me. And so
Mhm.
that's where my journey really began. And again, she was 10 months old, so we weren't busting out fractions or trigonometry or anything at 10 months old. But that's where that journey really started. And then
Yeah.
since then, I've had three others. There was like my daughter, and then a 4-year gap, and so then I have all my littles together, which they're not so little anymore. They're about tall. They're almost taller than me, but I'm only like barely 5 feet, so not too hard to do. But
All right, you're tiny.
yes, yes.
Thank you for that. What are some of the obstacles or barriers you face in terms of, when you decided that I'm going to homeschool my child, so what were some of the barriers you faced when you actually told family, when you told your husband or your partner, or friends, what were the barriers?
That's also a really good question. So I happen to be a very bold, opinionated, confident woman. And so I don't think they shared maybe some of those concerns to my face, you know? But traditionally, I have heard over the years, like, you didn't go to school for this, you don't know what you're doing, or how are you going to home educate when there's a bunch of babies and you're throwing up and you're sick and you're still trying to home educate these ones over here. Um, those types of barriers. And then also the people that just don't understand, like you were talking about before, like that out of the box education. And so they have a misunderstanding of what education looks like. And so just trying to give them a new lens, a new perspective on what home education looks like. And for our family, home education is very much a lifestyle. Um, like you said earlier, learning is everywhere. There's always opportunities for learning, and there's a variety of ways to learn. For example, a few years ago, we took our kids on a cruise to the Caribbean. And I mean, learning about new cultures and about, everything down there was amazing. And so we did a little bit of learning about the area before. And then while we were there, we were just immersed in this. And then when we went home, we just reinforced those concepts that we learned, a lot of culture and science related things. And even we did a whole unit on the Pirates of the Caribbean, because that's where we were in the Caribbean. And so there's always an opportunity to make everything about learning.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And that is so important. People to realize that education doesn't have to take place, learning doesn't have to take place in the building.
Right.
And I think COVID actually have taught us that You don't have to be in the school to be educated.
Right.
You know, school is everywhere, education is everywhere. And I think that have been a good awakening for a lot of people, because I feel that a lot of people were so into this square box that for them everything was, oh, you have to go to school, and it's like the traditional way, because they've been so programmed themselves that then begin to program their own children and everybody around them. So it's really nice that, you know, you actually share the fact that you guys were in the Caribbean, and you know something, you actually getting cheap travel anyway because you don't have to do it when the children are off.
That's true. Actually, we're my daughter's turning 16 this summer, and we wanted to take her on another trip, you know, the family, but for her birthday. And we're like, babe, like it's so much more expensive to go in the summer. So, you know, we're gonna go in the winter, and you know, it's way cheaper. But yeah, and we're gonna make that a whole learning experience too. And you know, the best part too is a few years ago, my husband, he was reading the Adventures of Lewis and Clark. He was reading their journal, you know, how they trekked through, you know, the west side of America after the Louisiana Purchase. And he was just so inspired by the Rocky Mountains and the description of the Rocky Mountains that he was like, babe, he was like, I want to take the kids. And so we quickly planned a trip. And so I had my lesson plans over here if this is what I was going to do, but I leave room for these types of things. And we just pivoted, and we started having everything be about, you know, the Louisiana Purchase and Sacagawea and Lewis and Clark and nature journaling, and then the Continental Divide, and like the, you know, a lot of rocks and minerals that are in that area. And so then we were talking about that, and then we were immersed in it. We were there, and like I said, just as we did with the Caribbean, we came home and we just reinforced those concepts, because they were able to actually see it, smell it, touch it. You know, this is it was alive to them.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, it was a live lesson, a real live lesson. That's the beauty, you know, of doing these things on the spot. As you know, we actually learn through seeing things, you know, feeling things. That's the way we learn more than just book reading it, because when you see it, you experience it. The more you
Right.
experience the learning, the more you're going to remember, and the more you're going to learn it. So that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What
Those
does
are those
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say those are some like big moments, but like you said earlier, learning can happen at the park. Learning can happen just outside, stopping and like looking at the flowers and identifying the flower families. You know, there's so much opportunity. It doesn't have to be in the Caribbean. It doesn't have to be, you know, in Colorado, which is again, United States. But you're right. It can really happen anywhere. Are you there? Did I lose you? Oh, there you are.
Right, yeah, I was just coughing away. Yes, it is. Thank you for that. That's very, very true. And I think that that's how people don't realize, you know, the power of learning everywhere. Because especially if you're doing maths and your child hate maths or feel maths boring, you could make maths come alive by, you know, teaching this child during a cooking program, during, you know, a conversation, during a going to the supermarket journey. And all those are taking maths into consideration, so that the child or the children begin to embrace and enjoy maths. Because if you have a teacher that is not very proactive, or is negative towards you, or don't teach you excitingly, you begin to hate the subject.
That's true.
You know, we all have stories on that, because I know when I came to this country, maths was one of my fantastic and favorite subjects. I had a maths teacher. She was so boring. I hated maths until I had another teacher that I actually started liking maths again. So when you actually ask people, the most subject that is hated is maths, because of how it was taught.
That's true. A lot of the reason I have found that people hate math too is that in a traditional setting, the math concepts are introduced. And then if they don't get it, they just move on. And so there's all of these holes. And so the foundation is weak. And that's why they don't like math is because they don't have a strong foundation. And so that is something for me as a child. I moved around a lot. I went to a different school every year until I was like 10 or 11. And so that was something that I didn't like math either, is because those concepts and the pegs in my brain were not strong. And so when I was having to learn something new, it was like starting all over again. And the definition and terms were confusing. Most of the time when kids don't understand math, it's because they don't know what's being asked of them. And so with my own children, that has been something that I have been really particular about, is that building that very strong foundation, strong mental math, and strong definition in terms, so that when they are doing math, a lot of times if they don't know what's being asked of them, we review that definition, like radius, those types of things. Like, what is the radius? Because most of the time they're able to figure it out once they know what's being asked of them.
Thank you. That is so true, because maths is made so complicated, and it's not complicated. That's the thing about it. Because as I said to some parents, that if you find your child is not enjoying maths or hate maths, you could actually find a way of doing basic maths in your home. Make education and learning come alive, so that they actually see that it's not that bad. It's part of your living experience. And that's the problem. When you don't make subject living experience, children begin to hate it as well. Thank you for that. What are the benefits of homeschooling over mainstream education? Because you have, although your children have not had mainstream education, you have had it.
Yes.
So what do you think, what are the benefits you're able to see?
Well, if I'm going to be really honest, I'm going to start with something that's not educationally based. It's not something that people first think about. But for me, it was something that was really important. We all have our own stories and our own backgrounds, and we all have, to be honest, certain elements of trauma, or grew up in a way that we're like, I wish this would have looked differently. I wish I would have experienced more love, or I wish I would have experienced fill in the blank, you know? And for me, I think one of the main benefits is to create a family culture that blooms. You know, is that, you know, pulling in the family and having a family culture. And so, and then on top of that, I think sibling relationships, I think, like we talked about, being able to identify some of the holes that they may not be getting and build upon that. Another benefit would be to be able to go and do something hands-on to really have that information, you know, sink in what they're learning. A benefit is the flexibility. You can travel at different times, you know, you're not bound to somebody else's schedule. Another flexibility is you can have a really nice rhythm. Like, for example, my rhythm now during each day and during the week looks different than when I had a bunch of little kids, you know, and it wasn't something that I had to get everybody up super early and be rushing out the door. It was something where I was able to have, you know, more time in the day. Also, we're not bound to, you know, a 9 to 3 schedule. We can home educate on Saturdays and on Sundays and in the evening. And there's just so many benefits with not being, you know, put into that time constraint.
Thank you. You know, the flexibility is one of the big things, and especially in terms of flexibility, which means that travel, you know, you don't get the high peak time. You know, you get the same holiday, but in a low session. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest benefits, because as we know, travel is a real education. Yeah. So, you know, and being able to do that anytime you want to outside of the peak time is a blessing. It's a real blessing.
We call it travel schooling.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. Exactly. Because, you know, you might, it's like last week I spoke to a home educator, and she spent 3 months in the Caribbean home educating a child. And I said, wow. Yeah, she said, we were there for 3 months. And we were, you know, he was being educated, you know, and I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing. What you call the beauty of doing those things. And another thing is the fact that it gives parents opportunity to stay home if they want to stay home with their children. Because it means that you are not forced to go out there because you have to. You know,
Right.
you just find an alternative lifestyle,
Right.
an alternative, you know, working.
Yeah. So alternative. I don't know where that kind of went that way, but I remember in high school, you know, they wanted us to write a paper on what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I wanted to write it on being a stay-at-home mom. And that's always been my dream. And they told me no. They told me I could not do that. And so they made us do these like aptitude tests. And this is really funny. So I'm like typing in all, you know, answer all the questions, like, you know, what do you want to be and all these things? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then it's supposed to spit out and generate a few career options for you. Well, my career options that the thing generated for me was a lawyer or a nun. I was like, what? I guess I had passion. I guess that's what it was trying to say.
That's funny though. You know, the nun one is real funny. You're thinking, oh.
I'm pretty sure that being a nun is a calling and not something that like a test can tell you to do.
Exactly, exactly. That's interesting. You know, and you become none of those. And none of the one that actually suggested, they didn't even, the thing is, there were no suggestion of even a teacher. If a teacher say, yes, it's close enough, right? But it's
Right.
way out. You know, that actually tell us those tests don't work, eh?
Mm-hmm.
They don't work.
I think that it would be a better idea for us to take our teenagers that are approaching that age and give them an opportunity to maybe do some shadowing or interviewing people in different jobs and careers. So that way they can see what is out there. So for example, my daughter last semester, I had her interview and shadow a few different people. And some of the jobs I was like, she's never going to want to do this, but I wanted her to see the skills that it takes to do this particular job and how that can transfer to something else. And what are the jobs around this? So for example, I had a quick TV segment that they interviewed me on. And so I brought my daughter along and she was able to see all the behind the scenes stuff that was happening, how the production was actually happening. And like, I personally had no idea all those things happened and she didn't either. And so even though she might not ever want to do that, it was still giving her an opportunity to see behind the scenes and what is out there, you know? And she has presently landed on being an architect. She has always had like a very phenomenal spatial ability ever since she was like, honestly, like 2 or 3. And so I'm not shocked by this at all. And so because of that, I'm trying to put her on a trajectory to get there at a faster rate than she would if she graduated and just started college. So we're exploring some of those dual credit, which is what we call here in America. I'm not sure if you guys have that, where she can do college while she's in high school. So we're looking at some of those options for her.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's brilliant because it means that she's having tastes and then she's deciding, okay, this is what I want to do. So therefore she's got all those, you know, she's exposed to all of those live situations before actually getting involved. That's brilliant. That's really is good. That's
and sometimes I think I'm bringing you with me because I need my computer charger. So we'll just walk.
Okay, that's right.
Sometimes, like I said, I think that people don't really even know what's out there. So for example, my husband, he is a manager at a car dealership. He handles the service side where cars are being fixed, and he has about 50 employees. But he didn't actually know much about cars when he started there. They wanted him for his management skills and some of the other things that go with that. And so I think sometimes we can forget that you don't have to, you know, go into something, you know, right away knowing what you want to do. But if you have certain skills, you know, you never know what opportunities can come from that. And to be really honest, like his job has been, you know, a huge blessing for us. And so, you know, even though he doesn't technically have a bunch of car skills, he's never like worked on a car.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true, because it means that, you know, you're exposed to other factors. Yeah, whereas in school you don't have those because it's far more rigid than anything else.
Right.
That is so, you know, so true. Tell us about your journey in terms of, what a typical day looks like in your
Ooh.
world of homeschooling, and how you support your 4 children.
Oh, that's a loaded question, because that definitely changes with their development and ability and our schedule. But for right now, there's been so many difficulties today with this technology. So sorry about that. But presently, I'd have to kind of tell you what a typical week looks like to give you
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so in this season that we're in, our rhythm is where in any given week, we have Mondays and Fridays where they're more of our slow days. Those are our days to wake up together, have breakfast together, have more of that family culture. We like to sit around and drink either tea or coffee or hot chocolate, and we have conversations. We have dialectic conversations. Dialectic mean truth-seeking conversations. We like to do our catechisms together. I really want them to know theology, current world events. So we sit and we talk about those things. And you probably have this idea of my children just like with little halos and just sitting and listening and being quiet, but that's actually not true. They're a little feral, and I love them that way. I'm raising them feral like that, and they're squirrely, and I have things for them to do with their hands. But because I've kind of trained them up this way, they can still be messing with something like Magna-Tiles or Play-Doh or something with their hands, but they're still listening and engaging. And as the older ones are getting older, I have them also start participating and leading too. So that way it's like they're practicing those rhetoric skills with their siblings. So that's really Monday and Friday. And I also save those days for us to go like on field trips. I like to do a little bit more relational activities. Today is Good Friday, and so we're actually taking a way slower day than usual because of it being Good Friday, and that's important to us. We do a lot of art on Mondays and Fridays. We just got done doing some paintings before I got on here. And then Tuesday, my daughter goes to a class from 9 to 3. And then Wednesdays, my boys have a writing class, and my youngest daughter, she plays and does school with another little girl. And then there's gymnastics. And then on Thursdays, my 3 younger ones, they go to a nature school. It's called School of the Wild, and they go from 9 to 3, rain or shine, and they're outside all day. And yesterday they were just out. They had like a field trip at their nature school, and they went fishing, and they also learned how to cook in like a Dutch oven. And so that's what it looks like during the week right now. And like I said, it changes because their development changes, different educational opportunities and options are coming around. And so yeah, so that's what it looks like right now.
Okay, that's beautiful. So which means that how did they choose in terms of doing the nature school? Did they choose it? Did you choose it? How did that come about?
Oh, I love this question. Great question, Debbie. So this came about because I was reflecting on what my vision was and what my mission was for my home education journey. And this is something I talk about with my clients with home education coaching. I walk them through to develop their vision and their mission, their style, rhythm. Those are really important. So as I was reflecting on my journey and what I wanted it to be, I was like, what is my vision? What is my mission? And what's the difference? So vision is big picture, right? What do I want this to look big picture? And then my mission is more, now how am I going to get there, right? And as I started looking at those things, I realized that I wanted my family, and the memories that I wanted my family to have were surrounded around adventure. They were surrounded around out of the box learning. They were surrounded by getting out and doing something with our hands. And so when I was looking at that, and like I said, where I'm from here in Missouri, there are a lot of educational options. And so as I was comparing all these things, I was like, what most aligns with my vision and my mission? I only have so much time and so much money to steward, just like everybody else. How am I best going to steward those in a way that when I'm older and I'm sitting around the table with my children and we're talking about our memories, what are they going to say? And what do I want them to say? So I had to make space for that. And so when I found out about the nature school, I was like, this is perfect. It's a 1 day a week. It happens to be a drop off. And at first I was a little like nervous about it, but now I'm like, bye. And I love the director. She's fantastic. And the kids, they like, we've done different educational opportunities. And, it'd be like, all right, get out the door, and every mom knows exactly what I'm talking about, trying to get all the lunches and, different things. But with School of the Wild, they're like standing all dressed at the, end of my bed, and it's like, I'm like, we're not leaving for another hour, guys. Like, let mama have her sleep, And so it has been such a blessing to our family to have that. And so that's kind of how that came around, is like I said, that reflection of what I really wanted my kids to say, in 20 years, what is my vision and how can I make that come to fruition?
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you. So when the 3 younger ones are going to the school, the nature school, what is your older daughter doing? What is she doing?
Okay, so she is in a different program where they meet 1 day a week. And so hers is on Tuesdays. And so on Thursdays, she'll either be completing some of her work, or sometimes we have one-on-one time together. She is in the rhetoric phase where there's a lot of conversations happening. And so she'll sometimes come down and we'll talk over those things. And then that's also a day too. Remember I talked about that shadowing and interviewing, where we'll kind of carve out time for that. Like, okay, we'll like make plans to go meet with somebody so she can shadow or interview them. And that's one of the most important things that I tell my clients, is that you need to be intentional in your homeschool. You need to be intentional. It can't just be words. You need to put it on the calendar. And to be honest, there's some days that I don't want to do these things. I'm like, I'd rather just sit with my coffee and do this. And some days I do that. I give myself a rest. We all deserve a Sabbath, but be intentional about it and you will see fruit from that.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true. And anything we need to do, we have to be intentional, or else it's just on a whim. That's why it is so important that we do it on a purpose and intentional, because we know, okay, this is the result we're looking for to get from it. That's so very, very true. Okay. So what are some of the challenges you've been experiencing and some of the triumphs you've been experiencing?
Okay, so that looks different for everybody. But I would say the challenges, when I really think about the challenges and the trials, it was me. I was the challenge and the trial. It was me trying to step out of like, okay, this is what I want it to look like. It was me trying to control a situation. So most of those trials and challenges were brought on by myself. And when I'm now able to look back and see, okay, it doesn't have to be like this. I don't have to have control like this. I have a lot more peace on my journey.
Okay, so thank you for that. So what you did was you just let go and let it be.
I did. And on top of that, there's obviously other little challenges and trials that come with that. For example, when you're trying to do an interview and your kids are being loud and I'm about to go ask them to be quiet, that's a challenge. Sit down, please, and lower your voice. Thank you. My son constructed a hanging, I guess, like fruit bat cave thing in there. So there's that. But challenges, I think a lot of common challenges are, I can't get them to sit still and do something. I hear that all the time. But like we've discussed before, maybe they don't need to sit still and do it. Maybe you just need to implement something different that's more life-giving for them to be able to want to learn. So that's a challenge. Challenges when you have a lot of littles, that can be hard. When you have a lot of littles and you're trying to juggle all of those things, but that's just the season. But if I'm going to be really honest, I don't really have a lot of trials and challenges, because when those things come up, I just take it in stride. Like it's either a seasonal thing, or it's me that I need to change my perspective. Now, again, of course, I, have one son that particularly doesn't like to do as much schoolwork as his brother, and he's a little slower at it, even though he's older, but that's okay. So like that trial and challenge, it's like, but that's okay. That's how his brain works. Does that make sense? I see it as a problem because I start comparing, but it's not a problem because that's just how he's made. And then
sorry, that's so beautiful. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Oh, I was going to say a newer challenge, though, is if you are, like, for example, my youngest daughter, I think she may be mildly dyslexic. So that has been a trial and a challenge. But again, she's going to get it. She's going to be fine. And it's just sticking with something and or changing to something that is more a way that her brain can process it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because what that is doing and what you're saying is, that's what I think you're saying is, you don't have to push it. You're going according to the pace. So, the fact that your son, he doesn't need to be compared with his brother because he's not ready to do it yet. So when you're ready, you come on, you get it sorted. And that's the beautiful thing, because in school, we have to teach them, okay, you need to finish this at this time, this at that time. But what they don't realize is the child may not be ready to take it in or ready to move on. But we are forcing them to move on irrespective of. And that could be quite sad, because it means that in the end, you just leave children behind. Because last week I was thinking of that, because I've got a child in one of my classes, and it's a big class. The class is 27.
Oh,
when I say it's a big class, it's, there's sometimes we have 31, but in that class is 27. And I was speaking to my colleague, and she said to me, well, the times he just sit there and, sometimes you wonder, what's going on with him. I said, yes, I wonder what's happening. I took his book for a book inspection because, from time to time we need to check the books to see what they've got in it. And I realized that he would give me answers sometimes, but he's written very little in that book. And when I look at it, he's not ready to move on because he have not connected to anything either. My colleague is saying, "Oh, I'm saying," and it's either passing over his head, or he's not yet developing that space to actually get on board with it. And the more I do my show on home educating, the more I'm realizing that this child is being done a disservice, because we are not supporting his needs, because he probably doesn't even know what his needs look like.
Right.
And there's that child that, he's not getting it. Because he's not ready to get it, because he's not at that stage. But sadly, we cannot wait for him. So we're not teaching him according to his needs. We are actually dragging him behind us because there's nothing. And I really wonder, what's going to happen to this child. And when I go back in on the 17th, I need to look at that very differently. I'm not too sure how I can help him, but I need to have some conversation, because he is way, way, way behind. And you have some of the children in the classes that are behind because they're not ready yet. They're not yet developed on that level to move on. But sadly, we are told that they have to move on. And that's some of the things that I fight against. Because as I told you earlier on, yeah.
Well, here we have a saying, a lot of home educators have a saying that they're like, behind who? Like there really is no behind. That's just somebody's standard, especially when you look at different schools and different organizations. Like they make these standards and they're just kind of like a buckshot somewhere, but it's not, like I said, behind who. Don't quote me on this verbatim, but I really think that it was Einstein that didn't even read fluently until he was 9.
Yes.
And so when we look here in America, I don't know what it looks like over there, but we're like, oh, you know, your 5-year-old's not reading chapter books. They're behind. But that's not true. Especially if we also look at strengths and weaknesses. So like my daughter, for example, she started reading at 4. That was a strength for her, right? And then my youngest daughter, who is mildly dyslexic, we are chugging along, you know, and she's 8.5, and she's nowhere near ready to read chapter books, and that's okay. You know, she doesn't, that's not a strength of hers, but it doesn't mean it can't be. It was working out. You know, your muscle may look like this, but if you're going to work it out, it can become a strength. And so I think you're really wise to assess your classroom like that and be like, how can we help this kid where he's at? You know, how can we help him make this weakness into a strength? So I think you're really good for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's so wonderful when you spoke about the fact that one child read at this age, the other one read at that age, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter. You know, that's the whole thing about it. In the traditional education, they're so hung up on, you know, as you said earlier on, your child have to be doing did at this age. And if it's not being done, then there is a problem. No, there is no problem. The child is not ready. That's it. We are already at a different stage. And that's what I find with the education system. We are pushing something on the children who are not yet ready.
Are you familiar with the classical model of education?
Tell me?
The classical model of education, some would argue it's the neoclassical, but I'm just going to use classical just, you know, for general terms. So the classical model of education is based off of the maturation of the brain. The classical model of education says that from age about 4 to age 10, they're in what they call the grammar stage. And during this grammar stage, they're learning a lot of through memorization, through hands-on learning, and through play, really. And then from about age 10 to about age 14, they're in what they call the dialectic phase. That dialectic means truth-seeking conversation. And then from about 15 to about 18, they're in what they call the rhetoric stage. And so our brains do this at a faster rate. I know you're a psychologist. I know you know this, but people forget that kids' brains it's kind of spread out like this as they're developing. And so what's happening is during this grammar stage, they are wanting to water hose them with information versus allowing them to naturally kind of grow into what they're supposed to do. And so during that grammar stage, what I see a lot is that's why if you look at the classical model, that it implements math on whatever grade level the kid is at that point. But what I see a lot, people are during that grammar stage start to water hose information because they're like, well, they should be here. But actually, if you look at test scores and if you look at the development of children, they're all over the board before age about 10 or 11. And once they hit that next maturation cycle in their brain, that leveling up around 10 or 11, if you notice, they all start to kind of assimilate better and you start seeing similar test scores because it's a different level where their brains are now kind of on a similar playing field. So we talk a lot about that.
It is, thank you. It is so true because when you look at Finland, the children don't go to school until they're 7 or 8. Because why do you need structure? At those age, before that age, they're going through play. And as we know, they learn so much more through play than any other way.
And song.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. And you know, the thing about it is, in Finland, the education in terms of way ahead of the United States or England. Because why? They allow the children to play and learn through play. Because I think it was last week or the week before, I had a mom on the show, and I think it's either Sweden or Finland. She was, you know, she was from, but she was a UK. She was living in the UK. So it's like, as she said, she had to deprogram her brain because she's thinking, my child is playing all day. My child's supposed to be doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Exactly. So for her was, oh my goodness. And then she realized that at age 5, the child is learn the language of the country, you
Right.
know. And that was something the child was doing through practice,
Right.
practical. And now she's beginning to realize, okay, yes, well, this is the way, this is what happened, and this is how the child is learning. Before that, in England, England is getting it all wrong, because getting the children to do structure learning before 7 doesn't make no sense. And we could see it, you know.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I can see her being like panicking for a second, like, wait.
was.
Yeah.
Exactly, she was, because you see, coming from the UK, when you
Yeah.
send your child in school and you know your child are being taught in the traditional way, etc., and then you go to another country in either Finland or Sweden, I can't remember, where they don't go to formal education until they're 7. And when you send your child to the nursery, your child is just playing all day. And so, what did you do? I've played. I've played, you know. So it's kind of shocking, because you're thinking, oh my goodness, my child is supposed to be doing X, Y, Z. And then I
You
say
know,
to us, yeah.
oh, I was going to say, I think a lot of times people forget that some of the things that they're learning through play are those social things that they can't learn anywhere else. And so at the end of the day, I mean, is it more important that our daughters, I meant to say that, I said daughter because my oldest is a daughter, that our children know algebra and know all of these other things? Or is it more important that they show kindness and empathy and critical thinking and relate to other humans and be able to practice time management? Really, though, at the end of the day, what is more important? And
Yeah.
obviously, we're teaching all of those things as well, all of those, what we would call our traditional subjects, or if you're in classical education, the strands, because everything integrates. But really, though, those playing things that you were talking about, the skills that they learn through play, that's pretty paramount too.
And I think that even more so than learning the traditional, education, how they teach us in the system. I
Right.
really do, Another thing is, do you follow curriculum?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. Okay. So, I, that's a loaded question. I do not follow a particular curriculum before a certain age. Remember when I talked about that dialectic phase?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they hit dialectic, when my kids hit 12, they participate in a classical model 1 day a week school. And we follow, they go there and we call that the tutor, because we're the teacher as the parents. And we kind of follow through that curriculum once they're in that dialectic phase. And they keep up with their peers and they have Socratic conversations with their peers starting at 12. But before that, I'm very eclectic. So when you say follow, I would say that I am aware of their educational objectives per child and per age and grade level, but I don't particularly follow a specific curriculum, because for one child that might not be life-giving. So for example, our math curriculum. My favorite math curriculum happens to be Saxon. I think it's really thorough. I love the way it comes all around. I don't think there's a lot of holes in that particular curriculum. However, my oldest daughter and my youngest son, they thrive with that particular curriculum, but my oldest son does not. And so then I have to pivot over here. And so we use some of the curriculum, but we also use uh, like hands-on manipulative things and other ways to reinforce. So in the context of math, I like to do a 20-20-20 minute rule. And that's where, like I said, following curriculum. So 20 minutes is strengthening those mental math processes. 20 minutes would be kind of working on that curriculum that they know and that they're trying to absorb. And then 20 minutes would be review, or sometimes hands-on learning like measurement, fractions, time, calendar, depending on their age. So that's why I say follow is very loose. I also leave a lot of room for child-led learning. So if we are learning, let's say my lesson plan, and I'm wanting to do this whole thing on botany, right? And so I'm like, guys, here's all the plants, Here's plant cells, here's the botany, here's the flower families, here's the seeds. We're jumping, we're diving in. But my son over here, he's really interested in like birds, right? Let's just say he wants to learn about birds, or we happen to be young earth creationists, and so he was wanting to learn a little bit more about the creation theory and versus evolution and dinosaurs and dragons and stuff like that. I'm not going to tell him that he can't. I'm not going to say, actually, we're learning about botany right now. Instead, I will integrate the two. We can integrate and learn, okay, so what plants were probably there? What was happening with that? Those are animals versus plants. How can we look at the plant cell versus the animal cell? So just integrating that and allowing opportunity for child-led learning, like you said earlier, when they're interested in it, it's going to stick. They're going to learn more. They're going to desire to learn. So I didn't get to say this earlier, but part of my mission is always being on the lookout for the presence of wonder. And so that's how we implement that, is that child-led learning. I wonder if this, or I wonder why this, or I wonder why this is like this. And so I've told some of my clients to instill that wonder and step out of that box, that traditional box, to implement something called Wonder Fridays. So on Fridays, like, the child gets to ask a question and then they just kind of go with it. And it's fun to see what kids wonder about.
I like this Wonder Friday. It really is nice as to what they wonder about. That's really nice.
Well, if you have children, or if maybe what they're going to wonder might be too big for that day, an opportunity and a chance or a thing that you could do is on that Sunday, be like, hey, you can rotate through your kids. And then on that Sunday, be like, hey, your Friday is coming up. What do you wonder? And so that way you can prepare for the week or whatever they're wondering about, and then you start exploring that on that Friday.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's wonderful. That's really is wonderful. Wow.
I would call it wonder schooling.
Sorry, what did you say? Sorry, mister. What did you say?
Oh, I would call what we do, the way we approach education, my educational philosophy would be like wonder schooling. I'm always wanting to be on the presence for the lookout of wonder, which is a quote by E.B. White.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting, because children wonder so much. I wonder if this is it. I wonder, especially when they're, young, under 10 and ages like that. It's like they're always wondering something.
Honestly, as an adult, I'm always wondering. We took a trip to Savannah, which is in Georgia, which is on the coast near the Atlantic. And while we were there, I was wondering so many things. I was wondering, like, I don't know if you guys know what Spanish moss is, but I was like, it like just kind of grows. It doesn't seem to have like any root systems. It's just like an air plant. So I was like, I wonder how this works, And then in Savannah, Georgia, there's a lot of fountains. And I was like, I wonder how many fountains are here, or I wonder why they decided to put the fountains here. And then we went to the beach, and it was like, I wonder why the sand is different here than it is when we're in Florida. And so just even I, as an adult, wonder. And so I can learn right alongside of my kids.
That's fantastic. That's really is good. Thank you for that. We're almost coming to the end. Okay. Another thing is, do you feel that home educating allows you to learn with your children?
Can you say
learn and teach them?
Can you say it again?
Yes, I said, do you think that home educating or homeschooling allow you to learn with your children, or you learn first and then you teach them, or you discover together? How do you do it?
Ooh, yes. I would absolutely say that I am the lead learner. Back to that classical model, my brain works faster at learning than theirs does. Remember, I went through that thing with the classical, the grammar, the dialectic, and the rhetoric. So if I were to go to school tomorrow to be a nurse, I would be in the grammar phase before I'd be in the rhetoric stage of application, right? As an adult, I can do this faster. So I can be learning and reading right alongside them and understand what's happening, and then I'm able to then impart that to my kids. So I would say a lot of what I'm doing is learning right next to them.
Mm-hmm.
On some subjects, I might have to go a little before them, just to kind of refresh myself, or kind of, like long division. When that came up again, there's a 4-year gap between my oldest and my next oldest. And so I'm not going to lie, I don't like long division. And so that's one of those things where I learn it and then I dump it, And so when the next one came up, I had to relearn it to be able to impart that. So that's one of those things, like I said, I may go before them, but for most of it, I'm learning alongside of them.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find that? How do you find learning alongside them? How do you find that experience?
Like, are you wanting me to say how I find resources, or do you mean how has that journey been?
Both of them.
Both of them. Okay. So in like, you can find these things in those curriculum books or in just regular books. So like I said, my brain works faster as an adult. And so I'm able to like look at the stuff and learn it faster, and then being able to impart that to them. But, and then my journey with that has been fantastic. Like, I have learned so much, specifically when we've learned timeline, when we've learned like geography, when we've learned even grammar, because I actually didn't have a very firm foundation specifically in any of those three things, and history. Like, what I know now about history, specifically the world wars, I didn't learn any of those things really in school. It was really touch and go. And so I've definitely redeemed my own education through that. But one of my favorite things to do is to teach from books. Like, just teach from like a normal book. Like, you don't have to have a big, curriculum book to impart something. One of my favorite books that I just got this book. So I really like this book. I'm going to open it real quick. So here's how the inside looks. And this, you can teach straight from this book. It talks about mold and penicillin and the fungi kingdom. And also the pictures and the way they're presented, it's really great for kids' brains, because they can, like, it's not just a text, it like breaks it down. And to be honest, it's really good for my brain, because I like it. It's attractive, So we have a lot of books like this where you can learn quality information in a very beautiful way.
Yeah. Thank you, because as you know, the brain learns things through images far more than through texts. Yes. And that's something I encourage my students to do mind map, because the brain connect with texts, with the neural pathway, etc. Whereas the traditional way, linear, the brain doesn't function on a linear basis. And that's what the traditional school does. Force the children to learn linear way. And that's not how your brain works.
Interesting. I know that particular. I knew that conceptually, but I didn't know that in the grammar of what you use. But that makes complete sense.
Yeah. Because you see, I constantly say to my students as well, when you see an image, you're more likely to remember that image than that same information written in text. Your brain's gone away, because, and it's the image, lovely bold pictures and, unusual drawing. Oh my goodness, the brain is real happy, because the brain is connecting with that. So that's one of the ways I teach my students, because I think it's important that I teach how the brain is going to grab it. And when you see young children, when you see books, young children are picture books. And they're launching picture books. That could tell you the whole story, right? Because of the images.
That's so true.
So that's something I feel that is important, that we encourage the children to do that. Right, my final question to you is, let's say someone is, there are a number of people who follow me, and some of them want to home educate or homeschool their children. What 3 tips would you give them as a way of, for them to do it? Because it's like they want to do it, but they're not too sure, they're frightened, etc. What would be your encouraging tips for them?
Okay. Well, besides checking out the laws wherever you live, because that's important, because they change in different places. But besides that, encouragement tips, I would say um, develop your vision and your mission. I would say write down what you want your kids to say about their home education journey when they're older. And then I would say write down your fears and what makes you feel inadequate and really assess if those are real fears and real concerns of being inadequate. Because most of the time, what people find once they are aware and they put it on paper, that they're not really valid fears or concerns. Now, I'm validating that they feel that way, that it can, and I validate that that is something that is scary to them, but most of the time it's not real. Like, well, I'm not good at math, so I can't teach it. Well, that's not true. That's not a real fear or something that makes you inadequate. You know, we live in the world of globalization and information. You're able to find these things out. You're able to Google it real quick. There's so many opportunities. You can find so many resources, tutors. I'm afraid that my kids are going to resent me. Well, that's something that people need to really look at. Well, why? And just break that down. So I know that those are probably not application tips, but I always point people there first. Vision, mission. What do you want your kids to say about this journey? And what are your fears? Where do you feel inadequate? So that way you can tackle those and go straight forward and have peace and joy on your education journey.
Those are 3 unusual tips, but they're 3 powerful tips. Because the one in terms of write down your fears, that is powerful. Because only when you put it on paper, you could realize that those are not fears. Those are your thoughts that the more you internalize, it becomes your reality. So when you write it down and you start dispelling it, you realize, oh my goodness, that's real nonsense, isn't it? And that's the power of writing. That's the power of writing down your things. You know, that really connects you because I am hot on journaling. And that really connects. Yeah, I'm hot on journaling because, you know, I think it's important. Everything I do, I encourage journaling, you know, because the power of that, when you write that down, you begin to, when you read it, you're thinking, oh my goodness, this doesn't make no sense. But when you have it in your head, it's making sense in your head.
Right.
When you put it on paper, you realize this makes no sense. Why do I have it in my head in the first place?
I want them to expose the lies and replace it with truth and an action.
Yeah. Yeah. That is really, really powerful. That's really, really powerful tip. And, you know, the other thing about it is a lot of parents, because they don't feel that they're good enough to teach their children, the minute they start writing those down, they realize, oh my goodness, of course I'm good enough. The teachers are not better than I am. You know, yes, they've gone to university, but they had to be programmed, and I'm here doing it firsthand, practical, real life stuff. You know, that's really powerful. Thank you so much. That's really powerful. Is there anything else you want to say to us before we say goodbye to the audience?
No, just thank you for having me. Well, I guess, yes, if you want to follow me, you can find me on Authentic Joy in the Journey on Instagram, or Bloom and Blossom Conference on Instagram. And thank you so much, Debbie, for reaching out and for having me. And I just want to let you guys know that you can do this. You can do it.
Thank you very much for accepting the offer to come and share your journey, and it's been wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been a fantastic session. I really do appreciate that. And it's really, you know, your tips are just powerful, especially the writing down. I suppose the reason why I'm connected even more with it, because, you know, I teach journaling, and I just think it's fantastic, because the more we take these things out of our head, the more we realize that it's a real nonsense seated in the head. Because when it's sitting in the head, we make all sorts of, you know, expectation, thought process, all this going on in the head. And, you know, putting it on paper, you see what a nonsense it is.
Correct.
Thank you guys for listening. I do apologize again for the lateness on we coming on, but as you guys know, technology have a way of doing its own thing. We have no control over it. It does what it has to do. Remember, tomorrow I've got another session of Female Educators Roundtable, and this is a very unusual one, actually. I had a mom who is a teacher who actually took a child out of the education system and home educates, but then realized that the home education wasn't working for her child. So she sent the child back into the mainstream education. So it'd be really lovely to hear her journey on that and what the challenges she faced in terms of, you know, taking the child out and sending the child back in, and whether, you know, how this child is thriving. So it'd be really interesting to hear that. So that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Normally on a Saturday, we look at female educators around the world sharing their journey of going back to school after COVID. But tomorrow I thought, oh, I just need to air this one, because this one, you know, I had her on my show before, because when I had her, I think her child, the child was being taken out, you know, so it's really nice, you know, for you to come back to tell us, well, I did take the child out, but had to put the child back in for whatever reason. So it'd be fantastic. So you guys join me tomorrow at the same time. There would be no technical problem, because I told my computer, you better fix up, right? So there's no way we're gonna have the technology problem. You know, when you speak it, right? I'm speaking it, I spoke it to the computer, I said, none of that for tomorrow. Right, you know, so we'll be there tomorrow at 7 o'clock sharing the journey of a home educator. So I see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Thanks a lot, people.